Okay, good morning. Welcome to the Council's Constitution Committee this morning. I'm Graham Watts. I'm the Assistant Director of Governance at the District Council. Unfortunately, we've had apologies for absence from the Chairman and the Vice Chairman for this morning's meeting. So the first item of business will be to elect a temporary Chairman from the floor. So do I have any nominations for the position of temporary Chairman, please? Is that seconded? Seconded. Any other? Okay, so all those in favour for Councillor Bellamy as temporary chairman? I think that's carried, so thank you, Councillor Bellamy. Would you like to join me on the top?
Could we have apologies for absence, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Apologies for absence have been received from Councillor Mark Whittington, Councillor Breda Griffin and Councillor Ian Stokes. We have been notified that Councillor Mary Whittington would be substituting for Councillor Mark Whittington, but as yet she's not arrived.
Councillor Baxter, please.
Thank you. Could I please ask for the reasons for the, at least for Chair and the Vice Chair not being here? It is most unusual.
Graham, please.
Thanks, Chairman. I don't know the circumstances in relation to the Chairman, but over the weekend I did get a voicemail from the Vice Chairman, and it's due to ill health, unfortunately. So it was very late notice for us to be able to communicate that with members.
Thank you. Councillor Baxter, sorry.
Thank you. So we've received apologies from Councillor Whittington, Councillor Mark Whittington, but we haven't been given a reason. So he's got a more important meeting, is what he's saying.
Chairman, I think we'd need to double check the correspondence we received. The apologies were given. I'll double check the reason why they were given and come back to Councillor Baxter.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Sandal, please. Thank you. Disclosure of interests. Members are asked to disclose any interests in matters considered at the meeting, please. If you during any time in the meeting, if you think you do have an interest, please let us know. Thank you. Minutes of the meeting held on the 17th of October. Has anybody got any comments on the minutes, please? Would anybody like to propose the minutes? Councillor Sandal's proposing. I don't mind seconding, as I was at the meeting. All those in favour that were present at the meeting, please. All those against? Abstentions? Thank you. Updates and actions from the previous meeting. Can I hand this over to you, Graham?
Thank you, Chairman. Apologies. So, in relation to minute number 14, this is an item that's on the agenda for discussion today. I think the Democratic Services Manager had been in correspondence, but I don't think a convenient date's been agreed for a meeting as suggested at the last meeting, so we put it on the agenda for today to have a discussion on that particular item. Item 14 in relation to meetings after Christmas, that's ongoing in consultation with the Chairman of the committee.
Thank you. Has anybody got any comments on that? Councillor Baxter, please.
Thank you. I'm not sure if it comes up here or later on in the agenda, but the review of scrutiny that we had a scrutiny panel on recently, what is the pathway of the review of scrutiny action plan, and when is it going to come here?
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, we had a workshop last week on the scrutiny review. The outcomes of that scrutiny review workshop will be fed into the Governance and Audit Committee in January. Depending on the action plan that's agreed, there may be certain actions that come out of that which would require consideration at this committee on those aspects that require constitutional changes. Until that action plan is implemented or agreed and implemented at Governance and Audit Committee, I can't really comment on those particular actions that this committee will have any involvement in. So until that meeting at Governance and Audit Committee, we won't know what the actions are in terms of their inclusion on that action plan.
Thank you, Graham. Councillor Baxter, please.
Thank you. At this meeting, again, there's not anywhere else I can ask it. Why didn't we used to have a work plan for this committee, and if so, where's it gone?
Graham, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I think the main item of business for this committee was the constitution review. Obviously, we've undertaken that review now, and it's been introduced and implemented. I think any other items that come before this committee would be in relation to any upcoming constitutional amendments that are required on an ad hoc basis, really. So this committee tends to kind of meet as and when it needs to consider any potential amendments to the constitution that are proposed or required at any given time. So there's not really a work programme in place at the moment. We are in the process of giving consideration to how we annually review the Constitution following its recent overhaul and adoption. But other than items such as those that are on the agenda today that come up, there's no real planned business for the committee.
Thank you. You happy with that reply, Councillor Baxter?
Since you asked, Chairman, no, I'm not happy with that reply. Every other committee of the Council has a work plan, and I think it's reasonable that we have a work plan.
I think from the previous meetings, we did say that the Constitution meeting was going to meet as and when. Don't know whether you could comment on that, Graham. But
no, I mean, happy to take items from the committee to incorporate to include into a work programme that this committee can agree at this meeting. So yeah, the work programme would be reliant on items coming from members of the committee. So happy to take those and put them into a work programme.
Thank you. Moving on to item 5, committee report template. Graham, please.
Thank you, Chairman. So at a recent Overview and Scrutiny Committee, I think there were some comments made about the new report template and the fact that it hadn't come before this committee prior to its implementation. So I just wanted to provide an overview as to the rationale behind the new report template. It was introduced in September, and one of the key considerations from it really was an administrative reasoning in terms of feedback from officers was that it was quite difficult to complete due to some technical fields and things, macros within the template. So we took that opportunity to redesign it. I think there was also comments received in relation to the implications section of the report, where in the previous template it was located at the bottom, and a lot of the key information, such as the financial information or legal comments, were often potentially lost at the end of the report, and it was felt that they were so significant they should have really been at the top of the report. So in the new report template, you'll see that the implications section is now at the top, and you know, that provides the report author to engage and consult with the professionals within certain other areas of the council, such as finance, legal, risk and mitigation, health and safety, just to ensure that those different service areas and different responsibilities have had the opportunity to feed into the report, and that it's in a more prominent position within the report template. I think one of the comments in relation to the report template that's brought it here as well is that on the old template there used to be a section where it showed the sign-off journey, and I think there were three key sign-off journeys in relation to a senior officer signing the report off, the relevant director, and then the cabinet member. In my experience, and having looked at report templates from other councils, that's an internal process really that shouldn't really be on a public document, in my opinion. And in liaising with the cabinet member for corporate governance, they were in agreement that it was an unnecessary inclusion in the report template. It's an internal process that ensures that the relevant people have looked at the report, are happy for it to be published, and I can give the committee an assurance that that process is still in place. And if you look at the report template that's just been circulated before you, there's a box at the end of that report template which is a control tool for the Democratic Services team to ensure that statutory comments from finance, statutory comments from governance, and the director and the cabinet member, that may also be a committee chairman. If it's not a cabinet member's report, it may be a report from a committee chairman, but all of the necessary sign-offs are undertaken, but it's not something that we feel is appropriate to place in the public domain as part of a public report. So that's the rationale for the report template, and the reason why that sign-off process is no longer publicly shown on the front page of the template. But happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Graham. Any questions? Councillor Baxter, please.
Yeah, I've got a few. Can you, I missed the start of that. What was the reason for reviewing the template in the first place, and who instigated it?
Graham, please.
So it was comments internally from senior management that raised concerns about using the actual report templates internally. The previous report template was quite it had fields on it and macros on it that didn't necessarily work very well. So technically, the template didn't work and it needed to be refreshed anyway. And we took that as an opportunity to take into account other feedback we'd received at senior management level about the content of the report. There was a lot of duplication in the old template as well. So it was in line with the Constitution review. The same principles were, let's avoid duplication. Let's make it easier to use, easier for members to read, and for anyone external to read as well. So it came from senior management in liaison with the cabinet member for governance, corporate governance.
Thank you.
And
Baxter.
So it came from officers, not members, and the liaison was with the cabinet member for corporate governance, which I think even at that time was Councillor Linda Wootton at the time. And it's a shame that she nor anybody else from the cabinet is here today to listen to our deliberations. So no, the council didn't ask for it. The officers asked for it because of problems with the macro. Yes, I have a problem with it. In the bit that you said, the sign-offs, although it might not be common practice for every other council, or for every, it might not be common for every council to do this. I don't see what the harm is in releasing information if it's available. And the reason I say that is not just because you've withdrawn information from this report that previously was useful to members and you. And when I say you, I mean the system. I mean Linda Wootton, but unfortunately she's not here. Not only has that information been withdrawn without any reference to, well, with very little reference to members, but also it's a pattern of taking information away from councillors, taking the opportunity to question away from councillors, taking away the opportunities for members of the public to ask councillors. So members of the public used to be able to come to full council and ask a question and a supplementary question. That's now gone. Members of the public used to be able to come to other meetings and ask questions, and that's now gone. We are meaning I guess, the Cabinet or the Cabinet member. We are systematically removing information to prevent, as I've said before, Cabinet members being faced with awkward questions that they don't know the answer to. So this is the latest in the line of it. We were told about this report on the 12th, not the 22nd, the 12th of August, and that was the day just before I went off on holiday for a fortnight. I don't think that I was the only person that took a holiday in August on this council, and consequently I wouldn't be surprised if we didn't get much feedback on the template. We then had only one meeting of the overview scrutiny committees before the death of Her Majesty the Queen, and consequently kind of a virtual shutdown. So we haven't test run this template, and I'm telling you that previously we have had problems with the sign-off process. We have had people claiming that they knew things or they didn't know things at particular times, and it is useful to backbenchers to know when Cabinet members knew about particular incidents. I would give the example of the Leisure Centre. We had a report about the Deepings Leisure Centre, that obviously we've had lots of reports about the Deepings Leisure Centre, but in the middle of that we also had a report about the sports and leisure activity strategy of South Kesteven, which was deliberately, in my opinion, or maybe accidentally, maybe it was accidentally released the day after the great big meeting about the Leisure Centre. And we knew that because of the dates on this report. So I say, if the information is available, then leave it in. Why would we remove it, except to save embarrassment to Cabinet members?
Graham.
Thank you, Chairman. I mean, just in relation to the report template itself, I think the explanation I've given is the rationale for why that information has been removed. I don't think it's... Sorry, yeah. Can you hear me okay? Yeah. Sorry. So, as I explained earlier, the sign-off process for me is an internal process. Excuse me?
Councillor Baxter.
Yes, you've explained that your personal opinion as an officer is that it's an internal process and it's of no consequence to the members. Members haven't expressed that opinion.
The Cabinet Member for Corporate Governance did, and within her portfolio, she has agreed that this new report template will be used for the Council's committees. We're obliged to provide the Council with specific information, which this report template does. There's no requirement for this Council to provide information as to when a report has been signed off by a Cabinet Member or a Director. So I've been working closely with the Cabinet Member for Corporate Governance, so this isn't just something that I've agreed will happen and implemented. This is something that has happened in consultation with the Cabinet Member who's responsible for corporate governance. There's no information that's removed from this template that affects your decision-making as a councillor. I disagree. In terms of the statutory information that we have to provide you as decision-makers, there's nothing removed from this template that alters your decision-making in any aspect of an item that's before a committee or full council or cabinet in relation to this new report template.
Thank you, Graham. Councillor Baxter.
In my opinion, it makes it easier for the Cabinet members to play silly games with the information that is released and when it is released. We get loads of information that is released after the agenda has been published. I can't count the number of times when we've had items on Overview Scrutiny Committee agendas and other agendas which are said to follow, because that information has not been ready at the time. And some of that, I think, is game playing, and some of that game playing can be stopped if we can see who knew what and when. Can I ask, please, if a member of the public was to ask for the dates of sign-off under a Freedom of Information request, would it be the Council's obligation to release the information, given that that information is held? Would it be possible to get that information under a Freedom of Information? If so, then why not just leave it in?
Graham, please.
I mean, there's a lot of correspondence that takes place as part of a report publication, so again, it would depend on what correspondence had taken place. But this sign-off box is removed by the team as part of the final report being added to the pack that's published. So the document that we would hold would not have this information within it at all. It would be deleted because we would know that everything's been signed off and it's then published. So there might be an email trail from a cabinet member to say, yes, I signed that report off, but we wouldn't hold this as a document on our file. It would be deleted and published.
Councillor Fellows, please.
He hasn't answered the question. My question was, if I asked for the information of which councillors knew about the content of the report and when did they sign it off, under a Freedom of Information request, would it be released? And are you seriously telling me that you have this box and then you delete it forever once you've signed off the report?
So, Chairman, I did provide an answer to the question. What I was saying was the FOI would come in, and because this box is deleted, yes, it is deleted, off the final version of the report, then we haven't got the information on that document. So a Freedom of Information request would come in, and on the report that we have on our file, it would not include this information. What I was explaining was there might be email trails that would suggest when a cabinet member signed a report off, and that potentially may be disclosable under the Act. But in terms of the document itself, the report, the box is deleted, and so on our final version of the report, it would not be there to be disclosed as part of a Freedom of Information request.
Councillor Fellows, please.
Thank you, Chair. I have to admit to being trying to get my mind around this, and I am a little confused, but I'll try and sort that out in my own head. The two things that came out from the last question was, I think I would have concerns if it could never ever be found when a particular action was signed off. I think that is really important, that information is always available. But the other thing was, and again, Graham will probably tell me, you told me that this was arrived at after consultation with the cabinet member, and you also indicated that members of the council had also been consulted or had a path to consultation. Can you reassure me that that actually has happened and that you're happy that further council members, other than just the cabinet member, have actually been consulted and find that this is a correct path to go through?
Graham, please.
So just to confirm, in consultation with the cabinet member for corporate governance, I was given the approval to progress with the new report template during the summer. It was felt that it was a good time to start with the new report template when all the meetings had effectively stopped during the recess, so that you're using one template for everything. So that's when, in September, that was felt as an appropriate time to commence with a new report template, because every committee would start at the same time, and you wouldn't have a kind of transition of different report templates. So during the summer recess, it was communicated to all members, and I appreciate obviously that members may take leave, but an email was sent out to all members to explain the new template, to explain the rollout date would be the 1st of September, and to explain the key changes on the report template. And as I say, there's no information that affects a committee's ability to take a decision as a consequence of this new report template. The information that we're obliged to provide you with to make an informed decision has not changed in terms of what is on this new report template.
Councillor Fellows, yep.
Yep, and to the specific point, it will be traceable and available to find out when an actual action was signed off by a cabinet member. Is that the ongoing situation? Is that the case?
Graham, please.
Thank you. So, again, it's part of the internal sign-off process. There's no obligation for a cabinet member to sign a report off in the legislation at all, or even in our constitution. It's just practice of this authority that we have a sign-off process that requires finance to sign a report off, legal to sign a report off, a director to sign a report off, and the cabinet member or the relevant committee chairman to sign a report off. That isn't prescribed anywhere. That's just a process that we have internally. So that information is managed by the Democratic Services team, who are ultimately responsible for publishing reports as part of agendas. So our team ensure that we are convinced the relevant people, as part of our internal process, have authorised and signed off the relevant sections of their report so that we can publish it, and that we know anything that we publish has gone through that internal process. And that's all that this represents. It's just an internal process to ensure that the relevant people have signed off a report, and it's, again, completely discretionary. It's not a prescribed function at all. It's something that we internally follow as good practice.
Councillor Baxter, please.
Thank you. Why do we have a report sign-off for overview scrutiny committee reports from the Cabinet member? I know that some, even backbench Conservatives, find it troublesome that when a report is presented to a committee in the name of a member of the Cabinet, then that instantly is pitting the committee against a Cabinet member. If a Cabinet member has recommended ABC, then it's difficult for a backbencher of the same party to say, well, actually, I prefer DEF. So why do we even do that? And also, why don't we do it consistently? When we went to Companies Committee last week, we had one report that was produced in the name of, I think, one of the officers, or maybe no one at all. So why do we have this report of the councillor for some reports and not for others? And actually, at that meeting, we also had a report in the name of the chairman of Leisure SK, even though that person was no longer the chairman of Leisure SK. So it's quite confusing for us to know who the reports are from when they're presented by other people, and in some cases, those people don't even hold the same jobs anymore.
Go ahead,
Thanks, Chairman. So that was one of the things that came up in the scrutiny review in terms of who reports should be either from or signed off from. So that's something that we're going to give due consideration to, and that will be included as part of the action plan following the workshop that we held last week. Pre-decision scrutiny was one of the things that came up as part of the scrutiny review, and I think if you've got a Cabinet member that's taken a decision to Cabinet and they have submitted an item on the agenda for overview and scrutiny to effectively consider that decision before it goes to Cabinet, then I think it probably is quite rightly in their name, because you're effectively holding them to account before they submit a report to Cabinet to take a decision on something. So if it's a Cabinet member if it's a report on its journey to Cabinet, I would expect it to be in the Cabinet member's name, because they're taking that same item to Cabinet for a decision. I think where you've got other items that the committee ask for that isn't necessarily on a journey to make a decision, but it's something that the committee have identified as being something they want to scrutinise, then that probably should come from an officer, because you're asking for information from a service area or from a professional officer of the authority to assist your overview and scrutiny committee's review of a subject. So I think there's definitely a difference there in terms of who the report should be from. There's certain circumstances where a report would come from an officer. So you may, at full council, for example, committee membership, that report was from Karen Bradford as Chief Executive, because it affects all, political balance and political affiliation affects all political groups on the authority. So as proper officers, sometimes it is relevant for a report to come from an officer as opposed to a Cabinet member. But there will, of course, be opportunities for Overview and Scrutiny Committee Chairman, for example, to take reports to Cabinet, and then, again, that was something that came out of our scrutiny review last week. So there may well be occasions when there's a report that's actually headed up by a committee chairman as opposed to a Cabinet member for consideration. So, there's definitely further consideration to take in respect of that particular issue that Councillor Baxter's raised.
Thank you. Councillor Baxter, please.
Thank you, Chair. So, does it ever happen? I once tried to take a report to an Overview Scrutiny Committee, and it wasn't allowed. I'm not going to say it wasn't possible, but it wasn't allowed. It was some time ago, before your time, I think before both your time. And does it ever happen that chairs, because I know that the Culture and Visitor Economy Scrutiny Committee, we had a report about the markets, and I think that was in the name of the Cabinet member, even though she didn't know much about the content of it at all. Mind you, that's not a new thing either. On this report, though, it says clearly in the top right-hand corner, report of councillor. So you're saying that this isn't necessarily the report of councillor, so that's wrong, isn't it?
Graham, please.
Yes, I mean, that would obviously be changed if it was an officer report as opposed to a councillor report. The vast majority of reports are in the name of a councillor, but I'm happy to amend our template to reflect that it obviously can be a report of an officer as well.
I would also like to formally propose, and there's only 3 of you, so I might not get a seconder. I would like to formally propose that we put the information back in about who has seen it, when have they signed it off. I'm not talking about all the people down here or the cast of thousands that are writing about the implications. I'm only talking about the report author, their boss, and the cabinet member, or the person responsible for the report that's in the top right-hand corner. I think that sign-off date is useful and it should be put back in, and I'd like to propose that.
I was just thinking about a way forward, if we could probably bring it back when the cabinet member and everybody else is here.
With respect, that's what this meeting is for. It's not our fault that they're not bothered to turn up.
Precisely. It's not my fault either. You know, like I say, I've turned up here in good faith the same as you. So, what was your proposal anyway, Councillor Baxter?
Until the cabinet member or the relevant chairs, members, leaders, whoever else, until they're actually here to defend the decision to remove the information. But until then, we put that information back in, because certainly as a member of the Constitution Committee and as a group leader and as a member of the backbenches, I think that information should not have been removed in the first place. It has caused consternation at other committees, and if we have the information, as we clearly do, because it's on the back, that we put that back in until the councillors at whichever committee make the decision to remove it. I think that we should, as a council generally, the council should be making the decisions and the officers following them, rather than the officers making decisions and then us realising that actually perhaps we should have had more input at the time.
Please, Graham. Yeah. Yes, please.
So, I mean, just to be really clear, officers make lots of decisions. Now, I know that they don't make decisions on policy, on practice, things like that, but we make lots of decisions. You don't make every housing benefit decision in council. You don't make every decision about planning in council or at council meetings. So it's not unusual. And for minor administrative things, which this is it's completely reasonable for officers to make a decision along those lines, and especially in consultation with the cabinet member responsible for this area of work. The thought, and I'm sorry I'm going to say this, the thought that there is some kind of conspiracy where members of staff are deliberately doing things so that to protect who knew what when, honestly, the thought that we would care is unbelievable, really. I just want you to be aware that we have not done this for any reason other than administrative, because there's no need for it to be there, and to give that responsibility and for the quality of the report to the author, so that they understand it's their name going on it. If we have everyone in the world checking it and saying they have, the responsibility for that report goes with the person who finally signs it off. And I think that it's really important that the officers understand that the quality of their report reflects on them and it's their name on it and nobody else's. So they can't say, yeah, but Alan signed it off. That isn't the way this should work. But the thought that, just to go back, the thought that is a conspiracy because officers in some way want to hide something, I find that really disappointing, and I hope it's not a view shared by all of the committee.
Thank you, Alan. Councillor Paul Fellows, please.
Thanks, Chair. I've taken on board everything everyone said, and again, obviously, I am struggling a little with this. If having that information in is of no great difficulty putting it in, I've a mind to consider why can it not go in. Having said that, the Constitution Committee, as far as I'm concerned, is about having a set of rules that we are improving and we can be guided by and will work. I'm also very conscious, and again I apologise, Chair, if I'm out of order with this, I'm aware looking round because of the position this committee has been put in by the absence of the Chair and the Vice Chair and other members. I'm aware of the fact that if I second this motion will be carried, just by looking round at numbers. I am more inclined to go with your suggestion, Chair, that perhaps there is a potential delay to revisit it, to consider once the relevant people who made these decisions are here to defend or talk about them. There is an element of me thinks, though, but if that happens, then this will just go through anyway, so it almost becomes a waste of time. So I'm really in a very difficult position, but I think where I want to be is with your motion, Chair, rather than, and because of the reasons that Alan has said, rather than go with that other one. So I'd welcome some advice from anyone else who's got an opinion, to be honest.
Are you proposing that, Councillor Fellows? Is that a proposal, or is that?
I think there's two proposals out there, Chair. So I think I'm putting it on the conscience of my colleagues, and I think I'd like to hear what other colleagues have got to say before I decide whether or not. Because the motion we have is Councillor Baxter's motion, and obviously that will then need to go to a seconder and then a vote. But before we go to that vote, I would like some response to potentially what I've just said.
Councillor Sandal, please.
Just to say, is this urgent that it has to be put in place? Could we put it in place and then...
Could you put your mic on, please, Susan?
Is it urgent that it's put in place? Could it be put in place if it needs to be done today and then look at adding or not adding the additional? Or is it okay just to leave it till there is more of us here? I mean, there's only a few of us to make a decision. Obviously, it's very... Ashley Baxter's very unhappy with the situation it is. Personally, I think it looks a professional document, and if Graham says it's okay, I would feel that then it would be okay to move forward. But I'm not sure about whether it's urgent or not, or whether we leave it to another day.
Well, I tend to agree with you, Councillor Sandal, sorry, especially after what Alan said. So, Councillor Baxter.
On the point of urgency, we were given the template of this on the 12th of August, and it had to be implemented by the 1st of September. So there was some kind of urgency then, and I think it's because of the breakneck pace of doing it that is causing this conversation in the first place. If we were talking about it the other way, then I would have no problem with saying, well, actually, it's not urgent. I'd leave it as it is. But it's been done now for whatever reason by the cabinet member. The cabinet member has got away with it. It actually was said at one of the committees last week, I think the Finance Committee, well, you've had this report for 2 months and you haven't complained about it. Well no, we are complaining about it. So looking at the room, and because the cabinet members and the chairs and all that are not here, and for the sake of moving on, then I would kind of capitulate, if you like, and say, all right, we'll stick with this one. I would rather the information was put back in, which I don't think would be any problem at all. I'd rather go back to in terms of the front page, go back to the old one. But if the more elegant way is to leave it until we've had the conversation properly at a meeting of the Constitution people where people turn up, then all right, leave it until then. As for the rest of the report, I mean, the monitoring officer mentioned that the person who authors the report has to take responsibility for it, although we've got this cast of thousands who also take responsibilities for the bits that they write, and also I think sometimes councillors need to know that it's not just a junior officer who has thought this up on the hoof. It's actually a junior officer who has been supervised by a senior officer who is kind of paid enough to take the bullets from the council if and when we disagree. And if there was any misunderstanding, I don't think this is a conspiracy by members of staff. If there is a conspiracy, it's from Cabinet members who wish to avoid scrutiny. And Cabinet members, again and again and again, take every opportunity to reduce the amount of scrutiny in this council, and they're the ones that my comments are aimed at, not officers.
I would assume that if somebody's put something in a report, that the head of the department would be ultimately responsible for that anyway. Is that correct, Graham?
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, and whoever the report author is, it is about accountability, and it's about, you know, empowering that officer to, you know, they're a professional officer, they're employed by the authority because, you know, because they're qualified, experienced, and they have the credentials to, you know, prepare that report and put it before a committee. As I've explained, the internal sign-off process ensures that management do have the opportunity to review it and sign it off and ensure they're happy with it. So that already takes place internally. But again, building on what Alan just mentioned, it is about having that report author as an accountable person for the quality of the report, and having, you know, rather than distorting that with various other officers or cabinet members who you know, like Alan said, it's, oh, your name's on there, so it's down to you. It's not. It's about the report author and them having responsibility and accountability.
Thank you. Are you withdrawing your first amendment or proposal, Councillor Baxter? Or
Yes, but I don't want to drop it for. I do want it to come back here when people can be bothered to.
So you are proposing that it comes back then when all the relevant members are here? Yes.
Yeah. While I've got the chair there, could someone please explain why the report to committees last week about Gravitas Housing didn't have anybody's name on it?
Go ahead, please.
I'd have to look at that. I'm afraid I don't know the details around that particular report, but I'm happy to look into that for you.
Councillor Fellows, are you seconding Councillor Baxter?
The latest version by Councillor.
Right. Any other proposals or amendments? Or so should we go to the vote then? All those in favour that this comes back when the relevant members are present? That was unanimous. Thank you. Item 6, Companies Committee to consider any changes to the Constitution relating to the Companies Committee. Graham, please.
Thank you, Chairman. So I think this item was put on the agenda following conversation at a previous meeting of the committee, and I think it related to, and Councillor Baxter I'm sure will correct me if I'm wrong, I think it related to a meeting of full council where the ability to ask a question of the chairman of the Companies Committee isn't currently within our constitution. So I think that was one of the issues that we potentially, well, that Councillor Baxter potentially wanted to discuss in terms of changing the constitution to allow for questions to be asked of the chairman of the Companies Committee. I don't know if there are any further amendments that were being proposed, but I'm happy to allow Councillor Baxter to explain further.
Councillor Baxter, please.
Yes, thank you. That was indeed the reason why I first noticed the problem with Companies Committee, is that we were in full council and I wanted to ask a question of the chair of Companies Committee. She was prepared to answer it, but the Constitution said that she wasn't allowed to answer it, and consequently we couldn't do that. So that made me look more closely at the Companies Committee generally, and it's kind of on its own. It doesn't have a page of its own in the Constitution. It doesn't have any rules about public speaking. I don't know if somebody asked to speak as a member of the public to the Companies Committee, whether or not they would be allowed to. I would suspect that the Cabinet would do everything in their power to prevent members of the public speaking to them, just like they do at every opportunity. I sent a note certainly to Mr Watts and possibly to the Chair of Constitution Committee about this. I don't know if that has been shared with the rest of the committee. Has it? No? I mean, I sent it some time ago when we were looking at organising a meeting. If you'll just give me a moment, Chair, I'll try and find that that email unless somebody's got it to hand. Certainly it could have, if I'd known that I could put my own name on a report, I'd have written a report for Constitution Committee about it myself and signed it off myself and put the dates on when I signed it myself. Just trying to...
Graham, please.
So, yeah, I didn't realise that there was a request to forward the email onto the committee, so if I've misunderstood, then I apologise, but no, I haven't forwarded anything. I thought that it would be an item on the agenda for discussion, which is why it's on the agenda today, but I apologise I hadn't picked up on the request to forward it.
Could I ask a question, please? Can, with all the other committees, can any member ask a question in the Companies Committee at the discretion, in the Companies Committee, not at Council, at the discretion of the Chairman?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, it's actually under Article 11, Companies Committee, and paragraph 11.4, attendance at meetings. It's the same practice as any other committee, so any non-committee member would be entitled to participate at the discretion of the Chairman.
So, in theory, then, if a member of the public had got an urgent question of the Companies Committee, they possibly could do it through their ward councillor?
Yes, Chairman. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry, Chair, but that's not the same thing at all.
No, I'm not saying it is, Councillor Black. I was just asking that for my own information. That's
okay, yeah. So yes, we have the privilege as members of the council to ask questions if we choose to on behalf of residents. But some residents, at some times, don't even have a ward councillor because the councillor has resigned or moved on or whatever. So it's.
Councillor Sandal, please.
Yes, is Councillor Baxter saying? I've read the Constitution in certain areas, but it's only the Companies Committee that they can't ask questions and not the other committees. And having said that, there's an election next year. Things are changing. We don't even know whether there'll be a Companies Committee next year. There might not be one because there aren't as many companies now. So perhaps we are jumping the gun by adding something to the Constitution that might not be necessary.
Thank you.
Well, with respect, I think to say that there might not be any companies is jumping the gun also, because there may well be companies. There'll certainly be East Midlands Building Control, and even though people are squashing the other ones, we don't know what's happening with Environment Committee. Callum has just put it back for 6 weeks for no apparent reason, or other than trouble in his group. He's kicked that back. To say that we shouldn't make rules for a company which does exist right now and cannot be changed unless full council removes it is.
I think there a difference between the companies that are wholly owned by South Kesteven and the. Graham, please.
Chairman, I might have misunderstood, Councillor Sander, but I thought you were talking about the committee, not the companies, but the committee itself.
Could you put your microphone on, please, Susan? Thank you.
He was saying that you can't ask the Companies Committee chairman a question. I said, does that apply to all the committees chairmans or just companies? Have they all got a home in there? Not that. And are we adding another one? Because I said, we do not know what the situation for any of them might be next year.
We're just checking on that one. I think Graham's just looking.
Chair, if I might, in the preamble to the full council meeting, it says that during the open questions to councillors by councillors, where we get one go each time, it says questions can be asked to any member of the cabinet, chairs and vice chairs of overview and scrutiny committees, but not to the regulatory committees like the chair of planning, the chair of, I think, maybe governance and audit, but licensing. But companies isn't on the list. It isn't on the list of yes or on the list of no. And so the decision has been taken by someone somewhere to say, no, we're not going to allow that because, I don't know, we want to move on or because it might be embarrassing for the person.
Graham, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, in terms of questions by councillors at full council, paragraph 12.2 of the council procedure rule states questions will only be addressed to the leader of the council, individual cabinet members, chairman or vice chairman of overview and scrutiny committees, or opposition political group leaders. So they are the prescribed councillors that can have questions asked of them. So that's why that particular format is followed. So if that was if you wanted more committees to be included in that in that list, then obviously that's an amendment to the Constitution. Below that paragraph, it does explicitly say that questions will not be addressed to the Chairman or Vice Chairman of Planning Committee, Licensing Committee or Governance and Audit Committee, or of any individual officer. So it doesn't include Companies Committee in 12.3, but it also doesn't include Companies Committee in 12.2, where it sets out those where questions will only be asked to, if that makes sense.
Is that something for future discussion, and if Councillor Baxter wanted to bring it back to this committee, or...?
If the committee agrees today to make a recommendation to include that provision, then that's something that would need to go to Council for approval.
Councillor Fellows, please.
Again, going through the presumption of that, there could be a question asked of a company and a company chairman through, I gather, either the leader of the council or the appropriate body. So there is a route to ask the question. I'm assuming there's a route to ask a question, because surely you can ask a question of, say, Callum about a particular company, which he might answer no. Anyway, let me finish, Councillor Baxter, because you interrupted me. I heard no, and I responded to it. I think, actually, though, it does, for me, feed into the discussion that we've just had for the last 20 minutes about accountability and who signed things off. And perhaps I'm preaching, or perhaps I shouldn't do this, but there were decisions made by the last administration in the setting up of companies which I really feel has just been not investigated at all. I feel the position we're in over certain things in the council at present, i.e. the Deepings Leisure Centre, that would have been resolved had questions been asked, and there'd be a follow back. It's about finding out who did what and when. So I totally support the notion that the chair of whatever companies we have left are questionable by the whole council. There has to be a route to do that, whether we can do it now or whether, again, that needs to come back. But whatever companies we are left with when the new council is set up in May, I really feel that there has to be a direct route of questioning for the chair of those companies.
Alan, please.
So just to, I hope, to help with a bit of clarity. So I think what we're talking about here is the questions to be the chairman of the company's committee itself being able to be asked questions at council. That's what we're dealing with. That's completely within your gift to say yes they can be or no they can't. However, the question of can the chairs of the various companies be asked questions, they're asked through the company's committee at the moment, because the company's committee acts as the shareholder. So that's like going to an annual general meeting where the shareholders can ask questions. So that's the role. That's where the companies are held to account, or should be. Is it companies committees? That's where that's there. As Councillor Sandal said, that we are obviously we often review our constitution and the committees that we have, and as we start to have a diminishing number of companies, it may be that the need to have a companies committee may diminish. So that's kind of the conversations that we've been having today, but it's completely within the gift of this committee to recommend to full council that we add that to one or the other of that list, in terms of you can ask questions of the companies committee chairman, or you can't at full council. There's nothing to stop us doing that today, as far as I can see.
Do you want to? Are you making a proposal then, Councillor Baxter?
Yes, two proposals, please. So I would like to recommend, with the form of wording to be agreed by yourself after the meeting, I'd like to propose that, first of all, we allow questions during the open questions at full council by councillors of the Chair of Companies Committee. And secondly, I'd like to propose that members of the public are allowed to participate in... members of the public are allowed to ask questions at the beginning of Companies Committee in the same way that they do overview scrutiny committees. I did have an email with some other details, but I'm sorry, Chair, I can't find it. I had a list because I'd thought about it. I thought it might have been shared before the meeting, but it hasn't. So I'd settle for those two, which I think are quite straightforward, allowing public access to companies committee meetings and also allowing questions during full council about them. I would like to, to continue, Paul, but I've seen your hand. I'd like to say that last week's company committee was a masterclass in how companies committee doesn't have the teeth it needs to hold companies to account. For a start, we didn't have the council of directors of the committees here, and secondly, we found out after one of the companies we discussed was Leisure SK. We discovered after the meeting had finished that the remaining councillor director of that company had actually resigned the previous day, and nobody thought to mention it during the meeting that there are no councillor directors on Leisure SK at this point when leisure issues or Leisure SK issues are one of the hottest potatoes in the council.
Councillor Fellows, please.
What I would like to do is I will gladly second Councillor Baxter's first proposal of that the chair of companies committee is included as a person that can be questioned, and I would like to move and vote. If we can move to that bit and get it done, then perhaps we could return to what seemingly was a second motion by Councillor Baxter. Is that possible?
Graham, please.
Sorry, just on the second one, I appreciate we're dealing with the first one, but I just wanted to... the public are entitled to attend meetings of the Companies Committee. Yeah, that's the bit. But I think in the previous statement you said that they weren't currently entitled to attend meetings. I just wanted to correct the record that it's a public meeting still, unless there's any exempt information that's divulged, then they would obviously be excluded. But yeah, they can still attend meetings, but at the moment there's no public speaking rights for them. So that's the part that we're seeking to change, I understand. Yeah.
So Councillor Baxter's proposal is that we would... do you want... Well...
Right, so I'll make the first proposal first. I propose that during the open questions at full council, questions may be asked of the chairman of Companies Committee.
And Councillor Fellows has seconded that.
But just for consistency, do you want to say vice chairman as well, just in case? Then, yeah.
Councillor Fellows has seconded that. So we'll go to the vote on that one then. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Back to you, Councillor Baxter.
Thank you. I'd like to make a second proposal, Chair, that members of the public be allowed to ask questions at meetings of the Companies Committee.
Councillor Fellows, did you want to speak on that?
I don't need to speak, Chair, but I will gladly second.
Yeah, so Councillor Fellows has seconded that. Councillor Sandal, please.
Can I ask why it hasn't been included in the past for speak at the Companies Committee meetings? I mean, can they not speak at any of the committee meetings? Or it's just Companies Committee meeting that they can't speak?
I think...
Or it's just been one of these again, it hasn't been included either way.
Yeah, well, I think Councillor Baxter said that they could, at the other scrutiny committees, that the public are allowed questions, but for whatever but not the Companies Committee. So, do you want to come in on that, Graham, or Councillor Baxter?
Thank you. Yes, I think it's come about as a kind of oversight because Companies Committee is neither a regulatory committee nor a overview scrutiny committee. It kind of fell in between and didn't have rules one way or the other. So happy. I think that's where it's kind of got left between in the midst of a very complicated overhaul of the Constitution. For me personally, if I thought I could get away with it, I would allow the public to ask questions at any meeting of the council. There are rules about asking questions at planning. You have to put them in beforehand, and there are times and so on. There are rules at full council, but for this committee, Constitution Committee, and I think the other regulatory committees, licensing, there would be rules about public speaking. So it's probably only Governance and Audit, Constitution and Companies Committee where the public are specifically not allowed to join in. I'd happily have an entitlement, because I don't think that we would be getting queues of people driving up from Bourne to ask questions at the Constitution Committee. I just don't think it would happen. But there is a time when people might want to make a point about the way the Constitution is being amended. For example, when we tried to strip them of their rights to speak at full council meetings. I'm sure that some people might have wished to speak at Constitution Committee about the change to the Constitution that withdrew their right to ask a supplementary question, but they're not allowed by the Constitution. However, having gone off on that track, I'd never get away with it, so I'd happily ask for the question to be questions from the public to be asked at Companies Committee for this meeting. Thank you.
So we've got a proposal. Councillor Sandal, please.
Just one question. I'm not sure. Obviously, there's certain committees, like he's just said, that public can't ask questions. I'm not sure which category the Companies Committee comes in, like the over scrutiny, the regulatory ones, or more of a general one. Can you explain to me whether it's? I'm sure it's beneficial for the public if they want to, but if there's any reason why they shouldn't be allowed to.
Graham or Alan, please.
No, I mean, it's not a quasi-judicial meeting like planning committee or licensing committee where you have to have a set process to assist with the decision-making in relation to applications that are submitted for determination at those committees. There's no reason why the public shouldn't be entitled to speak at Companies Committee. Obviously, there may be information that is exempt, which means they have to leave the room, but for those items of business that are open to the public, they're welcome to attend, and there's no reason why they shouldn't be able to ask questions or speak, Chairman.
Thank you. So we've got a proposer and a seconder. All those in favour, please. That's unanimous. Thank you. Is it any other business, I think, Graham? Yeah. That's the only trouble, isn't it? If you time out. Mine's timed out as well. Thank you. Yeah, so any other business? I've got nothing as chairman, but Councillor Fellows?
It's going to sound like a moan, and I suppose it is, but because of the absence for certain committee members, I find myself in the unique position, and this isn't a moan, of actually having a majority on a committee that isn't Conservative-led. And I'm also of a mind to realise that having been in this position, certain things could have been suggested which we could have voted through. Now, again, I'm not moaning about that, but I do think that the fact that we have a paucity of members at this committee perhaps should have led to the meeting being cancelled. But having said that, I'm glad it wasn't, because I think we've come a long way, and I'd like to thank the officers for being here.
Thank you very much. Graham, please.
I just wanted to make sure that we are quorate, so there'd be no reason to, yeah.
If there's no further comments, then I'll close the meeting at